Now the Yankees, they brought in McMahon, Rosario, Slater, Doval, Bird, Bednar, and Caballero. They brought in the most players out of any team that we're going to discuss in depth today. They are 5-5 since the last episode. 1-2 versus Toronto, 1-2 versus Philly, 3-1 versus Tampa. They're 5-5 in their last 10. With that said, 60-49. So they're keeping, in step with the Mets and the Phillies. They're 3.5 games back of Toronto. They're 3 up on wild card 1. So they still have a little bit of cushion there. Dylan, as you know, my fellow Yankee fan, how do you feel about this deadline and the direction right now?
So I think that the Yankees positioned themselves to compete for a World Series, and that was the big thing that I had going into the deadline. I feel like I'd been talking about it ad nauseum for months, that the team as currently constructed couldn't compete for a World Series. I don't necessarily think they're my favorite to come out of the AL, but they have a shot. And that's more than I could say than 3 weeks ago before moves were made for this team. I do think at its peak, they have the best bullpen in the AL. Will those guys be at their peak? That's to be determined. But Duvall, Weaver, Bednar, Williams, Cruz, who was pitching well, that's 5 really solid arms in the bullpen. Fried and Rodon is a great top of rotation. Luis Heel, by all accounts, has been pretty good in his rehab stints. I talked to you about this. I really wish they would have brought in a Merrill Kelly or Dustin May for the prices that those guys were at. It feels like in a 4th playoff game, Will Warren, Schiffler, Stroman. I'm not happy with any of those options. And then the Yankees finally did something in terms of positional players that I think that they should have done for years now, where it's get actual depth that you could play if you needed to in a spot. Obviously, Ryan McMahon, you mentioned it, first third baseman the team's had since Donaldson. And listen, is he great offensively? No, but he's, believe it or not, better than what they had. And he could play defense. I liked bringing in Ahmed Rosario. I liked Caballero as a steals guy. You give Volpe an off day, you still have speed. Like just little moves around the edges like that, where it's like if something does go wrong, there's proven players on this team rather than having to turn to a Peraza, who was, of course, traded, or a Yorbat Vivas, like guys that really were just holes in the lineup over the last month.
I couldn't agree more. And I think this forces them to actually sit Volpe more than they have, because Caballero isn't just a backup bench guy. He can actually play pretty decently well. So that's a very big positive, because Volpe tends to play better when he is rested.
And some pressure on him to field. I mean, the series that he is coming off of, it was in the last 6 games or last 5 games. He had 5 errors, 6 home runs. I mean, talk about a roller coaster from your shortstop.
I saw somebody equate it to the Jameis Winston of shortstop playing.
Right, and just a little bit of fire underneath him to be like, hey, like if you're not performing, this team's ready to win now, and we're not afraid to sit you. Because previously there was no options. Like, what are you going to do? Go to Peraza, who's just an auto out?
And Peraza now traded to the Angels for a no-name prospect and some international signing money. And we know how much Brian Cashman loves his international pool money. Yankees tend to do very well in that regard. That was a good move, good for Peraza. Same with sending Pereira over for Caballero. Pereira was going to be a Rule 5 type of guy. So instead of letting him go for nothing, we get somebody with 4 years of control who, is tied for the American League lead in steals, something that the Yankees desperately need to get better at.
Yeah.
So the biggest thing with the Yankees, I think, is that this deadline wasn't just for this year. I think they have one guy that they got that's on an expiring contract. Everybody else is here for at least another year. Doval's here for another 2.5 years. McMahon for another 2.5. Jake Bird from Colorado for 3.5. Caballero for 4.
Bednar's got 1.5 years, I believe.
Bednar 1.5 years. Rosario is the only expiring contract. So they didn't just go for this year. They built it out for next year to give themselves a much better base to build on.
Yeah, and the window obviously includes next year when Garrett Cole is
Yeah.
projected to return to this team. I thought for the prices that we saw players go for, and like it's no shade at the move that the Phillies made, but obviously Duran costed an arm and a leg. They would do it again. But I thought that Brian Cashman, for as much crap as Yankees fans give him, did his job very well, wheeled and
Yeah.
dealed, and got this team multiple high leverage relievers without giving up one of their top 7 prospects.
Look, I think this is the best trade deadline Brian Cashman has had maybe since that year where the Yankees sold back in I think it was 2016.
Yeah, we laugh, but he's absolutely right.
Yeah, I just that's what's funny is that the last time he did good when he was selling players.
Well, no, but but that's the thing. They haven't been sellers since. And the reason is because of that trade deadline. That trade deadline set them up for the next decade in terms of what they were able to acquire, and then further on set out to, trade and then get back. So, just the pieces that the Yankees have acquired over the years because of that trade deadline is still, taking effect. But I mean, in terms of what the Phillies gave up for Duran, I think is strictly the reason why, the Yankees had a better trade deadline in terms of what they were able to get. I think Dombrowski historically will overpay to get guys. He's not afraid to do that and deal his high prospects to get stars. It just has to work out. They're higher risk moves. And for the Yankees' sake, I think the biggest criticism Cashman has gotten over the past few trade deadlines is not buying enough and believing too much in guys that he just had no business believing in the roster. This year was not the case. He said, we need new role players. He went and got new role players. He said, we need another bat that can help support Judge and Stanton in this lineup. He went out and got McMahon, who is a guy who can potentially be a bigger bat in their lineup. This is definitely a lot of upgrades, and I think you got better defensively as well. I think that, the pieces that you brought in allow you to plug in an actual third baseman, multiple guys who have experience playing third base. It gets Jazz Chisholm more comfortable. And hey, it's never a bad option or bad thing to have more options. And I think that's where the Yankees are at.
Yeah, I know, Corey, you brought up to John and Ben their favorite move, and I don't know if that question's coming for me.
It was going to come because I have my own opinion on that too, but I want to hear yours.
My answer is Duvall. And my answer of Duvall is not just necessarily because of the player, but kind of talking about what Ben just said there, a little bit of what it represented. Cashman wasn't just doing the minimum to appease the fans by getting Bednar. Cashman recognized the bullpen over the last month with, I believe, a 6 ERA was a problem, and went out and got 3 quality arms, 2 of which were closers on their previous team in Bednar and Duvall, and the Yankees have had trouble closing out games. Now you have 4 options. Like, one of them better work because at this point you have brought in enough guys, and while I don't necessarily believe Duvall will be the closer come playoff time, he very well could be. He throws straight gas, 2.5 years control. And again, it was just that last move right before the buzzer beater of the deadline that made me think, okay, this was a great deadline for the Yankees, not a good one.
I mean, closer by committee is always fine. You don't need to have an established closer. Play the matchups, play who's available. You can put your best reliever in the highest leverage spot, and I think that's what the best teams do now. For me, I kind of explained it earlier. As much as I love the relievers and I'm really happy with what we got, I think the most under-the-radar move that I really enjoy is the Caballero trade. One, he has killed the Yankees whenever we've played Tampa, so getting him out of there is great. He brings speed, really good defense, and he has a bat that, isn't anything to laugh at. It's better than Peraza. It's better than Vivas. That's a trade that allows us to sit Volpe, as I said earlier, let Volpe get his head right. We don't have to just run him out. We don't have to play Rosario at short, which I was dreading. I think that's a really under the radar move, especially with all those years of control for a guy that was going to just get picked in the Rule 5 draft. That's a great Cashman like move that I think is going to have good return on investment.